Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly programme for people who feel disconnected from church. You might go to church, but you might not. It's not that you've got a bone to pick with Jesus, but what goes on in church sometimes is not really about following him. Or is it? This can lead, though, to feeling disillusioned and isolated. On this week's podcast, Randy Morocco from USA joins me to discuss the joys of being a pastor in a thriving community church, only to find that he would soon be resigning. Not because of him, but he would witness this once God-centred church start to deteriorate as a result of internal politics and affairs. Good afternoon to you, Randy. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Martin. Good to be able to talk with you.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, I was going to introduce you as a modern-day Robin Hood, not because you steal from the rich and give to the poor, but because you like shooting arrows. Explain more, good sir.
I do. I compete nationally here in the United States and travel all over the country to compete in my class, which now I'm over 50, so they call it the master's class, which is a nice way to say seniors or old people. But I compete professionally, have a lot of sponsors, and really enjoy the camaraderie that comes around with it. And also to be able to minister to people all over the country outside of the four walls of the church. So it really is a double-edged, I wouldn't say sword, I would say a double-edged
arrow.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you're competing and enjoying yourself, but also, God really has opened up a door and an avenue for me to minister to people that I would have never met behind the walls of my church.
Well, no doubt we can talk about that later on, and what your wife must think of being married to a modern day Robin Hood. And obviously you send her all in a quiver, don't you? But anyway, let's get enough puns out there. Okay, sir, if you're ready then, 5 quick questions so we can find out a bit more about your good self. Are you ready?
I think I am.
Good. Question number 1. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead that is, who would you invite so that you could ask questions about them and learn more about them?
Wow, that's a great question. There's so many people out there that you could think about, and it depends on which part of history I'm thinking about at the same time. But, I would love to talk to Paul the Apostle.
Oh, okay.
To sit down with him and sort of ask him about his letters and try to get clarification on some of those things that the modern church kind of wrestles over and fights over. And to see what he thinks about some of those things that he wrote that would make things maybe more clear, or it might even muddy the waters. But that would be a great conversation, I believe.
Yeah. Well, let me know if that happens.
Okay, I'll let you know.
Good answer. Thank you. Question number 2. We might have already the answer for this one. Who is your favourite biblical character, or favourite biblical story, or favourite parable?
Actually, it's going back to the Old Testament. My favorite biblical story has always been the story of Joseph.
Okay, why?
Because it's a story of redemption, and it really parallels the story of Jesus coming to earth, being rejected by his brothers, and then coming, and then when the next time he'll be revealed, everybody will know him, and it will be revealed that he truly is the king. So that's the story that I look at. It hits on so many levels. It's so deep, it's so powerful, and really it applies to us today that no matter what situation you find yourself in, there's always hope that you may be in the prison today, but there's always hope that tomorrow might be the day of elevation.
Great answer. Thank you. Question number 3. This could be interesting because I'm not aware we've ever had a prime minister that was born in the United States of America, but let's just assume that you are the next prime minister. But you're only prime minister for the day, and you could change any law or impose a new law. What would it be?
The United Kingdom would be the 51st state of the United States of America.
Because
because you're already stealing our football teams and the proper American football teams, and same language, and seems like the British don't like anybody except for the United States.
Pushing it,
and but other than that, laws. Good grief! What would I change? Oh, here's what I would change. I would make that people who drive and cruise in the passing lane would get Scud missiled.
I can hear, Scud missile. You're going back to the 1980s. Yes, yes. That is a fantastic. I can hear big amen to many people listening this morning or this afternoon on that one. That's a great answer. Thank you. Question number 4. Actually, that was 2 answers, but yes. Outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out?
I honestly, it goes back to archery. It goes back to, going out, spending time in the outdoors, spending time in the woods, being with friends, being with new friends, being with people that enjoy archery and competing. It's fabulous. To me, I love it. I just went fishing with my 2 younger boys. We went down to the coast and fished for redfish and sea trout and flounder and things like that. Obviously, spending time with family, spending time with my archery friends, it's a blessing that, you pinch yourself. I get to do this. I get to really enjoy these days in the outdoors. And so love that kind of stuff. So
I suppose combining both, you'd be shooting fish in a barrel then, wouldn't you? That's an expression we have from America.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great stuff. Finally, question number 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment?
Years ago when I first started dating my wife, her and her family, they invited me on a camping trip. We were driving a long way, stopped at a gas station and far away from home. And so, it's like you have to go, and ran to the bathroom and didn't want to sit on an infected toilet seat. So I threw down some toilet paper to cover the toilet seat. Well, 10 minutes later, I'm walking out the door with a dangling piece of toilet paper hanging out of the back of my pants in front of everybody, and somebody finally said, "Hey man, you got some toilet paper hanging up." And you look down and I have a tail of toilet paper hanging out of my britches that I'm walking through thank God it was in a location that nobody knew who I was, and back before cameras were in modern use. So yeah, that was kind of embarrassing. And you know how that goes. So
yeah, funny enough, that reminds me of what happened to me once. I had the privilege of going over to America to do a load of interviews for a radio station I was working at the time. And we went to this big, enormous church where we were going to be speaking, like 5-10 minutes before the main pastor took over. Mm-hmm. And like yourself, I thought I'd better go and relieve myself, and went to the cubicles. And I thought, wow, only in America would you have purpose-built toilet paper in the shape of a seat to put on. I thought that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And then I thought, well, do you know what I will do? Is what do they call it in Hawaii when you put a garland of flowers around your neck? What's that called?
A lei.
A lei, thank you. So I thought it'd be a great idea, because we were having to speak like 3 or 4 times during the morning, because the church was big, but loads of people wanted to come in. That my interest getter would be, that here we go, look what I found, and I put it around my head as if it was a lei, think it'd be hilarious. Yeah, it wasn't. You could hear the rustling of wind paper going all over the place. It was like, no, it wasn't funny at all at the end. And in fact, it was so unfunny, they didn't ask me to speak for the remaining 2 times. So.
Oh boy.
There you go, humour, eh? Humour.
Oh boy.
But talking of which, thank you for that. And later on, we'll find out who your Christian hero is. at the end of the program. So we'll find out later on. That'd be fantastic. Looking forward to that. Randy, we found out a bit about archery from you already, but I did say at the beginning that you were a pastor. How did you get involved in pastoring?
Well, years ago, I had sensed a call that God was placing upon my heart to enter into the ministry, and I kind of put that on the shelf. Long story made bearable. Got married, began to have kids, started working. In 2001, when I was 31 years old, began to work for a guy in sales, and at that time really sensed that God was moving on my heart to start my studies up, start to go into the ministry. So I did. I ordered my studies and took them by correspondence course through the Assemblies of God, and began to study and look forward to it, and began to do very well. And that's what sort of launched me into the ministry. It was something that would never go away. I always wanted to go into the ministry, just wasn't sure if it was God or if it was me, if I thought it was cool. But it was just a constant thing that would come up in my heart. It never went away. And so finally I decided that I'd listened, I had heard God enough, and okay, God, I will do this. And that sort of launched my career for 17 years in the ministry. Very enjoyable, loved every minute of it. There were tough times, there were difficult times, but really don't regret any of it, that I went into the ministry and just loved the people that I ministered to. And now it's, I would have never thought that I would be ministering outside of the church walls, but now that is what God is having me do right now.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what God actually does through you, especially when it comes to the archery contest that you enter every week or every other week. But I'd like to think, if that's all right, the bit now whereby everything was going brilliantly in your church. It was a thriving church. It was in a small town, I suppose, 4,000, 5,000 population, something like that. Would that be right?
Right.
So everything was going really well. So why did you resign?
There are certain things that in churches sort of happen behind the scenes that are hidden from the general population. And I don't want this to be a situation where it's, a person who isn't going to church is like, well, that's the reason I don't go to church. Or a person who is going to church is scared off of what's going on, because there are many, many, many good churches. And the church that I pastored, it was part of a handful of other churches. Mm-hmm. And it had a basic senior pastor, but it had campus pastors also. And I was one of those campus pastors, and I began to notice some real changes of direction that the main leadership of the churches wanted to go in. And I began to realize that it was going in a way that I couldn't support or I wanted to be a part of. Now, I loved our church. I loved the people, loved the community. We had bought a house there. Mm-hmm. Really thought that I would be there for the rest of my life. I really thought that, this could happen. But when things started to get to a place with the leadership of the churches, there were things that happened that I would say that dealt with finances that I questioned, and the setup of the church was that the board was no longer elected by the people. they were hand selected to be on that board, which basically I looked at it as, you could select people that really just want to agree with you. And if they didn't really agree with you, well, the next time it came around, you could tell them that, hey, you got to go, and I'm going to pick another person that agrees with me. And I know that's not what it started out to be. Nothing ever starts out to be. And I don't believe that anybody goes into the ministry thinking, I want to royally mess this up. I want to come into a church and I want this to be the absolute worst experience for me and for the people, and I want to royally mess this up. Nobody does that. But there are things that begin to happen that, historically, we talked about this, with Rome, with the French Revolution, with all these things, that things sometimes, if you're not careful, you can allow them to deteriorate right in front of you with the best intentions, but you don't have anybody there to tell you, hey, listen, you're going the wrong way. And so when I started to see things kind of go in a way that I just didn't like them to go, it reminded me of when Solomon died and he gave his kingdom over to Rehoboam. And Rehoboam, sat down, and the elders came to Rehoboam and said, hey, listen, if you'll do this, we're with you. We'll help you. But his young advisors came along and said, don't listen to them. They're just a bunch of old fuddy-duddies, and, tell them that, your father's, your father was tough and this, that, and the other, but I'm tougher, and I'll scourge you with scorpions and this, that, and the other. And immediately you see that did not go over very well. So I started to see signs of things that, and again, I don't want to paint the picture of this evil empire, this evil people.
I understand.
But I started seeing the signs of things happening, and I did not want to cause division. I didn't want to cause issues. I didn't want to cause a revolution per se, that, hey, it's us against the evil empire, and I'm going to stand my ground, and I'm going to split this church off, and I'm going to cause all kinds of issues and try to wrestle the church away and split the church off, and I'm going to start something over here. So I did what I felt that God was moving me to do. And in 2019, in October of 2019, I approached the board and approached the leadership of the church organization. And I said, hey guys, God is asking me to resign. And, well, why? Well, I said, I feel that you're heading in a direction that I just cannot go in. And instead of me holding out, instead of me causing issues, I'm going to step aside. You could put somebody else in place in the church and go for it. Do what God has called you to do. He's not called me to do this. He's called me to do something else. And I stepped out of the way. So little did I know that at the end of December 31st, 2019, 2020 was coming. Mm-hmm. And all the mess that happened with that. So God really spared us a lot. God spared us so many things that when we stepped out of the way, we didn't know that the church that I've pastored for 13 years was going to be closed down and sold off. Another church was going to be closed down and sold off. That all of those campuses were going to be spun off, and now they're on their own, and it just became a total nightmare for that church organization, and God spared us the whole thing.
See, two things that come to mind. Firstly, I've seen it the other way round, whereby the church elects the officers. But my bone of contention there is that just because you go to church doesn't mean you're necessarily a Christian, let alone praying for the right people to take the jobs.
Right.
And I've seen it firsthand, whereby, we'll give it to Fred or we'll give it to Bert or something like that because that'll do. But they're serious jobs. So I've seen the other side of that, which I wasn't that impressed with. But so what do you think on that point then?
I think that when you involve people, you're asking for trouble, and you're always going to have somebody that's going to be an issue for you at church, no matter what. But the advantage of the people that they feel that they have a voice and they can voice their opinion, they can voice their displeasure, they can voice their concern to the pastor, to somebody, without feeling the wrath of thou shalt not touch the Lord's anointed, without feeling the intimidation of, well, you can't complain because if you complain, the pastor's going to hear about it, pastor's going to be mad. Yes. And so there is no perfect situation here. There's no perfect, but I found that I would much rather the people at the church feel that they have a voice and they can share their opinions to a board member, to me as a pastor, rather than it being something where they have no clue what's going on. They have no idea what's happening. They have no sense of anything that goes on in the church. Yeah. And and what happens too is that, you can start taking this, you can start calling it what you want, apostolic authority or whatever like that. And you can start using that. Well, I've got the apostolic authority to select whoever I want to select. And by the way, God told me to do so. So if you have concerns or you have complaints, well, you're arguing against God. Yes. And that always ends badly because it takes away any sort of personal responsibility. It takes away any sort of situation where you have people in the church who really care about the church and about the way it's going, the direction it's going, but it's never voiced and it's never talked about because, well, God told him to do this and our job is just simply to obey. When their concerns or their opinions might be from God and might be very, very legitimate. So, and I'm saying there's no perfect situation because it involves people.
And if it wasn't for people, the job would have been perfect. If it
wasn't for people, you'd have a great time. Yeah. But it involves people. And if you look in the Bible, in Acts, when the church is being formed, they had some very, very, very difficult conversations. They had arguments. They had division. They had all kinds of things going on in the book of Acts. But out of that struggle came, hey, listen, we're going to agree on this. It might not be perfect, but this is what we agree on. Yes. And this is how we're going to march forward into the future, even though it was not simple, it was not easy. And you never see in the Old Testament church one looming figure that's just sitting there going, well, this is what's going to happen, and just put up with it. Because people that are forced to do something, they're still going to do what they want to do, even though it was forced. Look at the American Revolution and the tax on tea and all the other kind of stuff. Most people wanted to be an English colony, a British colony, but they got to a place where it just, King Charles, I believe it was, or King whoever it was, it became unbearable and they rebelled. In any revolution, they rebel. And in the same thing in the church, if you do not listen to your people, if you don't listen to your board, people will rebel. that's just the nature of human beings. So,
yes. Well,
long answer for.
It's a great answer, and of course, my silly mind thinks that had you still been a colony, think of the cricket team you'd have. It'd be amazing. You'd win everything.
Well, and in going back, I'm mainly thinking of church leaders as we talk about this, but as a parishioner, someone who goes to church and goes home.
Yeah.
And make sure that, the church you're at, you have a voice. Make sure that the church that you're in, that you have a voice, that you can voice your concerns, without feeling beat up, without feeling like it doesn't matter, without feeling, thou shalt not touch the Lord's anointed. And by complaining, that you really have a voice of concern, because in the book, once again, the book of Acts, that's what the Hellenistic Jews versus the Greek Jews, and all of a sudden there's an issue. Somebody had to voice that concern, and out of it comes a compromise, and out of it comes a solution. And a lot of times concerns are there because there's a problem, and without them you wouldn't have solutions.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we come to your archery, what that entails, I'd just like to know, obviously when you made the decision to resign, and unfortunately you've told us what's happened, not because of you, but as a result of church decisions, that it's more or less imploded from within. All these other satellite churches that were part of the big mother church, they must have each had their own pastor. What did they think? What did they think of you resigning, first of all?
Be nice, be kind. I think at the time it was, you're leaving us. You're leaving the gang. You're leaving, and basically it was sad because I nobody contacted me. There was never like, hey, let's sit down and talk, and what's really going on. And I think that a lot, they knew what was sort of going on, but just didn't want to know. They didn't want to know. They didn't want to hear anything that would kind of rock the boat, or sort of like there's the elephant in the room and I'm pointing to the elephant, but hey, we're still going to pretend that the elephant doesn't exist.
Yes.
So I just try to keep my distance. I didn't want to cause issues, cause concerns, talk to people and say, hey, listen, do you see what's happening? But I think now people can look back upon it and go, he got out just in time. Because it wasn't just, the coronavirus that happened that caused issues. That there were other things. There were things that, there were, there was things that went on that, got police investigation going on with a certain campus, and and I'm not going to speak about that. That then from what I understand was kind of glossed over, covered up until things were brought back out, and a person unfortunately is in jail right now because of those things, and which caused a whole bunch of issues with trust for the church and trust for leadership, and it caused a whole bunch of issues that the church now is still paying for, all because of knowing that something was going on, knowing that something wrong was going on, but we're going to cover it up. We're going to gloss over it because we don't want people to know what's happening. And the Bible says what happens in secret will get shouted from the rooftops, and it was.
Yes.
Unfortunate, sad, to watch people that I knew who were great people, good people, helped many, many, many thousands of lives, end very, very, very poorly. It's not
Yes.
something you rejoice over. It's something that wow.
Yeah.
It's very, very sad.
I remember years ago doing an interview with a gentleman from a well-known church in Yorkshire, and he was telling me about a similar situation, really, where things got out of control, and the body that was set up above this person's church to look after him, they weren't, and the result of which completely imploded, became a major embarrassment. And I said, all those people that went to church and have seen this happen, what happened to them? And he was very honourable to me. And on air live, he said about 300, 400 people have lost their faith. And, it was so sad to hear that. As far as you're aware, from what you've seen as a result of the church sadly imploding, how many people do you think have lost their faith, or where do you think they're standing at the moment?
I don't know if here in America, faith is very deeply ingrained in people. We have a huge faith background. There's churches on every corner. Going to church is such a huge ordeal over here in America. I don't know if they lost their faith. I think what happens is that you lose your faith in church, in the organization of church. And I think what's compounded it is the coronavirus, where churches were shut down.
Yes.
There was a big schism between those who we should hold our ground and stay in church and keep the church doors open, and the other people that you need to shut it down. And all of a sudden you have infighting between church people, good people, who love God, who love the same Jesus that we love. And they're fighting over stay in church, shut it down, or stay away. And people are dying and people are getting sick. And there's all kinds of things going, compounded by the fact that there's stuff going on in their church that was hidden and came out and caused leadership questions and leadership issues. And so now you go, where do we go? Who do we trust?
Yes.
How do we, and you just, and here's the thing, coming from pastoring a church, coming from that side of it, it's so difficult to walk into a church and just assimilate back into the fabric of a church. And that's been the difficult thing for my wife and my family, is how do we assimilate in going from the pulpit side to the pew side? How do we assimilate back into a church and feel like everything is normal and everything is back to everything's great and everything's wonderful and everything's normal? And it's just, it's hard not to overanalyze everything that happens within the four walls of a church.
Yeah.
And I could imagine a person who was on the pew side, who goes into the next church and goes, can I trust you? Pastor, can I trust you? Board, can I trust you? Can I trust this church? And where do you go? Who do you talk to? And at times you're wary of maybe the church that you went to was hyper Pentecostal or super this or super that, and you've watched things happen. You're going, do I trust that again? Do I trust that person who said he was a prophet and prophesied and got it completely wrong and totally biffed it and left us hanging? Now do I go the total opposite side and say, well, I'll never trust a prophet again? And those are the things that happens. But you want a place that they're grounded on the Word of God. And I believe that, Vicar Martin last week said that. You know, be grounded on the word of God. You know, don't just take people's words for it. Don't just chase the next prophet. Don't just chase the next big thing. Be grounded on the word of God. And because, as you said, we don't have a bone to pick with Jesus. You know, this isn't about we're mad at Jesus. We're mad at God. This is about that church leaders and pastors and, you know, and board members and those in charge need to understand that their decisions can really crush the faith of those sheep sitting in the pulpit or in the pew. And most of those sheep don't have anything to do with what goes on behind the scenes, but they are usually the ones that are hurt the worst. And so we need to think about them and need to consider this isn't about power. This isn't about me versus the board. This isn't about me gaining, you know, any kind of good standing in my denomination. Is that there's somebody out there sitting in the pew. There's a sheep out there sitting in the pew that's going to be hurt, that needs to know that they're loved and they're cared for. Who cares about what they call you? Pastor, apostle, bishop, you know, grand poobah. Who cares about your title?
Yeah.
Nobody cares about your title. You go outside your four walls of your church, you go to the grocery store and you say, hey, I'm apostle so-and-so. That person will look at you like, I don't care. You're still paying $5 for a jar of peanut butter.
Yeah.
Your title and $5 will get you that jar of peanut butter. They don't care. No.
It's good that you mentioned your wife, and I'm just thinking, it must have been awful for her and for your family, because 1 minute, whether you like it or not, you know, you're either the pastor's kids or you're the pastor's wife. You know, whether you like it or not, they are somebody in that church.
Yes.
And suddenly to go from being somebody to, oh, actually, my husband's resigned, I'm actually a nobody. That must have hit your wife very hard. What would she say if she was here today about that?
I think my wife, she struggled with the pastor's wife situation. Mm-hmm. I'm more the person that likes to be out front. I'm the person that loves the crowd. I love public speaking. I love, and what happens too in that is you start to get addicted to the, hey, you're pretty good. Oh, pastor, you did a good job. Oh, pastor, you're so this and you're so that and you're so the other. And you can get addicted to the, oh, what am I looking for? To the pats on the back that comes with being a pastor.
Yeah.
She does not like that. And so for her, for me to resign was sort of a relief for her that we're not out front anymore, where I think I had a lot of problems with it because I watched myself sort of get addicted to, hey, you're pretty good.
Yes.
Or the pat on the back, or the recognition out in the public. Walk through your town, hey, I know you. I know you. And, and if you don't watch yourself, you can sort of, get to a place where, I'm pretty darn good. And you can start believing your own press clippings and thinking that, everybody should kind of bow down to you and no, you're there to serve the sheep. You're there. I heard somebody say, never trust a pastor that doesn't smell like sheep.
That's a great line. I like that.
It's a great line, because really it's like when it comes down to it, you're serving sheep.
Yeah.
Whether you're a prophet, whatever title you want to call yourself, you're serving sheep. That's all. You're a servant. And, I heard somebody said one time that a guy, went and got business cards made up, and he made a business cards and he put apostle, prophet, and evangelist on them. And the A was italicized, the prophet was P was evangelized, and the E was italicized. And he gave it to him, and he sort of put his glasses on. He looked, and it said APE, ape. What, you're an ape? You're an ape? No, I'm an apostle, prophet, and evangelist. I don't care.
All three in one.
How do you treat people? Do you love the sheep? Are you feeding the sheep? Jesus told Peter, "Hey, go love my sheep. Go feed my sheep. Go care for my sheep."
Yes.
I'm not bestowing upon you a title. I'm bestowing upon you a function and a purpose. Go take care of my sheep.
Yes.
Highest calling you could ever have.
Yeah.
The highest calling you could ever have. Not, oh, you're an apostle, you're a bishop, you're this, you're that. Oh, that's even better than a pastor. You're a prophet. That's better than a pastor. No, it's not.
Yes.
No, it's not.
Yes.
Jesus gave the greatest command to go feed my sheep. The greatest thing you could ever do.
Well, Randy, I really thank you for your honesty there. And me being flippant, as you most probably are aware by now, I certainly can be flippant. I take it you had to give back your private jet, did you, to the mother church?
I kept that.
Which would obviously come in very handy when you have to fly across to all these archery competitions, of course.
Well, and it's just one of those things where I fly it myself, of course, and save money,
I'm sure you could justify it, if only that were the case. If only that were the case. Because last time I spoke to you, I think you were on your mobile phone, obviously hands-free, in your car, driving across the whole several American states to go and do an archery competition. What got you involved in doing this?
Oh, boy. Again, long story made short. Got into archery when I was about 7 years old.
Oh, really?
That was about 20. That was 20 years ago, right?
Okay, I'll believe you.
And began to shoot. Loved it. Fell in love with archery. Just fell in love with shooting a bow. Back a few years ago, when I was 37, I got involved in competition. Found out that I was pretty good at it. I was starting to win things. And while I was pastoring my church, began to travel around the state and started winning tournaments, started to get known by people in the archery industry, in the archery community. Mm-hmm. They were like, "You're a pastor, right?" And it was hard for them to comprehend and fathom that this pastor was shooting a bow better than they were and starting to win, starting to make a name for myself. Well, it opened up the door for doing weddings, doing funerals, counseling sessions. And my church, they loved it because they knew that I have a local congregation here, but it evolved into, now I've got a congregation out there that I'm going to them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to them. I'm shooting. I'm enjoying myself, but also people can come to me. They can call me. They can talk to me. We could have a counseling session. I could lead people to Christ that will never come through the doors of my church. And, honestly, it's opened up some really nice doors to do this kind of ministering where competing for their money, but also I'm being a pastor to a lot of people who are unchurched. And I run into a lot of people out there who, with your the title of your podcast, Off-Grid Christianity, people who love God, love Jesus, would identify as Christians, who just don't go to church because there's been politics, there's been hurt, there's been wounds, there's been a lot of things that happened that they just don't go to church.
Yeah.
And if I can be there to encourage them, hey, listen, God still loves you. He still cares about you. Just because you don't go to church doesn't, God's not angry at you. He's not going to send you to hell. But also that if there's a way that I can help this be a redemptive story, a redemptive situation, that I'm there for you. That don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't say all churches are bad just because there was a bad apple.
Yeah.
And we know that and we understand that.
Yeah. So let's get a bigger picture then, just how huge archery is in America, because obviously over here in the UK we think of Robin Hood and the little competitions we've seen on the films in years gone by. How big is an archery competition for when you go and enter, sir?
Well, if you look, in America, you have we have a very large bow hunting population, and I think the number is right around 50 million people in the United States bow hunt.
50 million?
50 million.
Wow.
So, you have a tremendous amount of people who shoot archery, whether it's to shoot competition or to bow hunt here in America.
And what do you mean by bow hunt?
Oh, you take your bow and you go out and you hunt for deer,
right,
or bear, or whatever you're hunting for, and it's very highly effective. I don't want to get involved in whether someone's in the cruelty of things, but it's a very, very effective way to get the job done. And so and in that, of course, it evolved into, you have competitions of people who shoot bows and arrows. So some of the competitions are local, which are under 100 people. Some of them are national, international, which in Las Vegas, there's about 3,500 people who show up to some of these competitions.
Wow. So
the amount of people that spend their time to travel to these competitions is in 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 at times. And so it opens up the door for people from all over the nation. I've met people from the UK, met people from France, from Japan, from Germany, shot with a couple guys from Germany earlier this year. Australia, all over the world, people come to shoot and compete in archery tournaments.
So to put it into perspective then, how good are you? In the nicest possible way, of course.
I have 9 national championships.
Wow.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, I know a lot of guys, good shooters, who don't have any. And God has blessed me to have 9. So in all of that, the success at archery really paves the way and opens the door for ministry.
Yes.
Because they know you from, hey, that guy's pretty good. I know who he is. And it paves the way for you to, hey, but I'm also a pastor. And if you need help, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And I don't take that lightly. It's weird. It's weird for me. Like we moved to a new area here in Ohio, and don't know anybody. I'm at the archery range and I'm shooting my bow. Run into a guy. He's a little bit older. He's almost 70. Actually emigrated from Switzerland 39 years ago. And we're all sitting there talking, and the one guy, what's your name? And I told him Randy Morocco, and the guy from Switzerland, his eyes got real big. He went, "Oh, you're Randy Morocco." And I kind of looked at him like, he goes, I know who you are. I've read about you and I've seen you on, and it's like, oh, that's who. And so for me, it's like, it's weird that people, but what it helps me do is wherever I'm at, wherever I'm shooting,
Yes.
remember, people know who you are.
And you say he's from Switzerland. His name wasn't William Tell by any chance, was it?
It was Roger Federer, by the way.
No, that would have been an amazing story had that been the case. That would have been.
So it makes me okay. People know who you are. People know who you represent. You represent God. Act that way. Act that way, because that individual who sees you, you have to represent God in a way that he would approve. And so yeah, it's, being a Christian isn't just, being one on Sunday, it's being one all the time. And no matter what you're doing, and you have to represent God in the best possible way you can.
Well, it looks like time is going to defeat us. We still have the 2-minute hero, which I haven't got a clue who you're going to choose, so that's going to be very interesting. But in closing this particular section, Randy, for those that are listening on this podcast today and they're thinking, I agree with some of those stuff, but you know what, I still can't get across the door on a Sunday to go to church. What would you say to them?
I would say that the hurts that you felt are from being human and from other people being human. That is the weakest link in the whole Christian cog.
Yeah.
Is that people are human. They do human things. That no matter who you follow, they have the potential to fail you. But the church is something that God has set up, that Jesus died for. You might not find what you're looking for tomorrow instantaneously. Sometimes you do need a break.
Yes.
Sometimes you need to sit down and have devotions by yourself, to have devotions with your family. Listen to something, listen to a podcast. We have over here, I've been listening to the Bible in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, who's a Catholic priest. I'm not Catholic, but I'm enjoying it very, very, very much because it's giving me the Bible from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love being challenged, and I love to see things from different perspectives. And that's what I see in a lot of churches, is that a lot of people just don't want to be challenged. They don't want their thought process to be challenged. But challenge your thought process. And okay, maybe we're going to take a break right now, but eventually I'm going to find my way back to a fellowship, a group of people that I know God has ready for me. Today might not be the day, but that day will come. Yeah. And put your trust back in God, and put your trust back in people, even though we know they're the weakest. They're the weakest link. And listen, I failed people. I know I've done things and said things that, boy, if I had a time machine to go back, boy, I wish I wouldn't have said those things or done those things. But at that time, you thought it was the right thing to do. Now you realize, I messed that up. I said those things. I preached those things. I did those things. I should have shown more grace. Should have shown more love.
Yes.
But at that time, I didn't know. I thought I was just doing the right thing.
Yes.
But I messed it up.
But it's never too late to unmess it, if that's the right expression. Randy, listen, it's been a privilege to hear everything you've shared. And in the remaining 2 minutes, please, if that's okay, I'd like you to give me who your Christian hero is. And the basic remit of this is that the person has to be dead So just so that people can't come round and say, "Oh, you chose such a." Have you? What's happened to him now that all the facts are out? So we don't want that. So it has to be dead and not in the Bible. So if you could start off, please, by giving us your name and who your hero is. Off you go, good sir. Thank you.
It can't be you.
I'm not dead yet, unless you know something I don't know.
Hey, my name is Randy Morocco, and my hero, I tell you, this is such a tough thing because my hero, oh man, it would have to be my Uncle Pete Sanitate, guy named Jim Leally, my grandfather, Bill Scott, my dad. And here's the reason I just can't pick one person, is because all of these men in various times of my life have had such a profound effect on me as I was growing up. It wasn't just, oh man, this, I read something, it was Homer, it was, Julius Caesar, or it was somebody else. It was that these men at various times in my life steered me into being the man I am today. And whether they knew it or not, whether they understood it or not, whether it was their profound effect, that it was their lifelong goal that they were going to touch this young guy and it was going to stick with me for my whole life, they did it. And there are people out there that I know that I've touched, and Martin, you've touched, that one of these days they're going to look back upon a question like this and say, wasn't the big hero. It was that guy who, boy, for that moment, for that time that I had with him, helped steer my life. So it's a shout out to all the unsung heroes that never, because of their godliness, because of their love for other people, became heroes to me.
Great choice. Great choice, Randy. Thank you so much, sir, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, my friend. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. God bless. Bye-bye.